So while you're thinking about that, I got a request from Matt. I didn't have time to do the whole thing, Matt, on grades. So what I did is I took your updated MyEcon Lab homework test. I altered the amount of points that are left with those two categories, but I didn't touch the other category. Most of those are the gimme points, so you guys have, high scores. Those are most of the gimme points anyway. So what this reflects then is the other still where it was. We got a final for 60, 90 on the, or 30 on the project. So 566 points. That's the breakdown of the class with the percentage. Is that what you're looking for, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I will pass this around. You guys can look at it. Because we got to get on to speculative. Back to my question now. International reserves.
Is that when other countries hold reserves of our money?
Yes, good. So other countries holding other currencies. And I want to say something more specific though. It's not other countries. Be a little more specific. Other countries' government. So it's their central bank basically holding currencies. All right. So let's walk through a speculative attack. There's been a couple cases where this has caused some major problems of financial crisis. One of them, I'm kind of curious. Oh, Josh, I was going to ask you. You replied back to my email that you liked that article. What did you like about the article? Did you guys read at least the highlighted part of that article? Because I kind of think it tied in with some of that. Josh just sent me back. Thanks for the article. So. Put you on the spot. I didn't know if there was something else in the article. I highlighted the immigration one, which I thought. Because to me, it's so much fun to see how we could take that. I just had this on my online class. Let me ask this kid asked a good question, which is a really good question. No questions are bad, of course, but a really good question. In my principles of macro class, he said, is it too late for us to do a free market approach to government because we've been doing it for so long this way or whatever? And so my response back to him is, don't think of it as an either-or question. The right answer to that, there was a famous economist named Robert Coase who wrote something in one of his most famous articles. He's the guy that basically came up with addressing externalities and market failures. And he said, perhaps, I wish I had the direct quote, I'm close. Perhaps it's better to not look at the problem as an either-or with two states of utopia. Free, pure market capitalism, like Allison kind of speaks about, versus some sort of top-down, heavy government socialism, right? That's not the right way to look at it. Perhaps it's better to look at the status quo and see if we can make improvements to it. That was Ronald Coase's, I said Robert, Ronald Coase's theory. So in other words, so if this is free market and this is big government, whatever big means, wherever we are, if we're here, is there ways that we can think about drifting this way, or do we continue to drift this way? So let's think about the status quo and see if there's improvements to make to the status quo. And that's part of what Allison's making even with this FDIC. What if we change that from 250 to 100? That would be a move, a little movement this way, right? So don't think of the problem as either or. I have to be either big government or free market capitalism, like basically limited to no government. Government almost does do something like that. Whatever that means to different people, it's almost hogwash. So let's just look at where we are today and say, are there some things? So that article that I sent you guys had, the new one that I hadn't heard of before was the idea of bidding on immigrants, which that would turn people inside out. You'd have to be careful with your marketing. bidding for immigrants. What are you talking about? We're back to slavery? Oh, you free market capitalists are terrible. No, you don't understand, right? We've got voluntary labor, and let's allow employers, if they think that that person who's not a citizen is more valuable than a citizen would be, they're going to have to pay for it. They pay for the margin, right? That's all it is. It's not that big of a deal. Hire a citizen and you're fine. Hire a non-citizen, there's going to be some sort of premium paid or paid. But the argument, you guys don't have enough background on this. I'm getting really sidetracked. This is kind of fun. Feel free to ask questions. We can get sidetracked a little bit. The rules currently, this is the part I didn't have time to get into in that article. But I had the guy that I used to work with, he brought in a guy from, it was actually Thailand, that we might speak about later. And you have to present this case to the government that says, hey, his name was Norman. We really need Norman. I can't find any American that would have his types of skills. This guy's really unique. And for my particular company, I needed Norman at my company for whatever reason. That's the kind of petition that you make to get the H-1B visa, I think? H-1B visa, have you guys heard of that? So you get basically a work permit, but you make this case that the non-citizen is somehow more valuable and that you can't find an American. The economist, the market economist, says, put your money where your mouth is. You think he's valuable? Well, you need to bid an amount of how much value to your company it would be to have Norman stay with you. So instead of there being no pricing involved, no cost, right? From doing a cost-benefit analysis, writing up a little story about how valuable he is to see if it goes, and also hopefully we'll reduce down on some of that cronyism of, well, I know Bob in Washington, and he'll help me get this H-1B visa. He's got connections. Well, connections are crap. That's not a market system. That doesn't help us out in getting efficient outcomes. Okay, comments. Did you say enough? Did I even let you speak?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
What? When I was talking about United Airlines, they said about why they didn't just keep raising the price.
Oh yeah, right.
Because every time I've flown home, my plane's always been overbooked.
Yeah.
And they so I've flown with Virgin or Delta, and every single time they always say they just keep raising the price.
Yeah.
Like sell for like $600.
Yeah.
They want to skip the flight.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why they didn't just do that.
Right. Yeah, and that's right. So that's a market-based approach to getting somebody to voluntarily get off the plane instead of hauling them off with this incident that happened, right? So I think United has come out and made some sort of policy, new company policy that if somebody's seated in a plane, we're not hauling you off anymore or something. Whatever. They're trying to just patch up their shortcomings now. But yeah, that's a good example of just using a market-based approach to solving the problem as opposed to this top-down, my airline pilots are more important than you get off the plane. Well, we randomly selected you, so everybody had a chance of going off. I don't care, right? Then we get the YouTube sensation with multiple hits. Okay, any other comments?
I just had a military comment in there as well, that you said that now we have a military that's actually run and using wages and different incentives and patriotism to attract them rather than drafting them. We're actually seeing like a more passionate people who actually want to be there versus seeing society be resentful of the draft itself.
Yeah, the military comment was a good one too. All right, well, if you guys can subscribe to his thing if you want. He sends that type of stuff all the time. I've sent it to you guys before, I think, in the past. So Richard Ron, I kind of like his. I've listened to him at some conferences. He wears an eye patch, so he's kind of an interesting character. Yeah, he's got this eye patch. So he's an economist up there given with a black eye patch. So he's kind of a pirate economist. All right, so international reserves. We've got Bank B. So let me get rid of this here. All right, speculative attack. Country A, country B, and then we've have got the central bank of country B, right? This is the central bank of country B. And country B starts to become the hot country, right? So people think that things are going on, the economy looks strong, and so they want to invest in that country. And as they start to do that, it starts to put pressure on the exchange rates. So imagine if country B here is in high demand. Let me just, I won't even go to a graph here. Will that cause appreciation or depreciation of that currency? Countries in hot demand, their economy's doing good, it looks like a place you can really make some money, they're buying up their real estate, they're investing in country B. Country B's the boomer. What happens? Appreciation or depreciation of that currency? Appreciation. All right. So now, the wrinkle that we're putting into this is suppose that the country B is currently pursuing a fixed exchange rate or a pegged exchange rate. They're wanting to manage the exchange rate. So now we have appreciation going on. So what does the bank need to do to intervene and keep the currency par? Do they need to increase the supply of their currency or decrease it or buy it up? So what do you think? Did I hear an increase from Joe? Is that what you said?
Yeah, increase.
So increase. Cool with that? So let's see. How many people's brains might be going B, dollars of A for B, supply demand. High demand, hot demand, leads to appreciation from E1 to E2. Right? That was the story I just told. Hot country, hot demand. But we don't want to do that. We're going to try to keep the currency fixed at par. So we call it par as whatever we chose to keep the currency fixed at. And so in order to do that, we need to increase the supply of the currency to this level to keep it at par. Right? Now remember, when they're increasing the supply, they're bringing more of their currency to the market to buy up other people's currency. So in doing that, they're starting to stockpile little A's over here. There's an A. There's an A. These are little dollar bills here. Right? So as that happens, they start to stockpile international reserves. And they're just holding them. So on our accounting system that we were doing last time, there's an increase in international reserves. Okay, now that works out pretty good. They can continue to acquire A's. The problem is, what happens when things start to get a little shaky? They're like, hey, that country, I don't know, they had such a big boom going. Gosh, there's those big buildings in the air. All of a sudden, you're thinking kind of Big Short. You're like, this thing's not sustainable, right? This country is too hot. Like, it's bound to crash. And so people start falling back. They start holding back. When they start going back, what happens to the currency if it was a free market? So I'm back to, maybe I'm jumping around too much, but if this was a free market, would the currency appreciate or depreciate? It would tend to depreciate. We're going the opposite direction, right? So now the demand curve is starting to slip to the downward direction. Well, no big deal. There would be depreciation, but now we're going to cut back this supply. We're out here, and now we're going to come back. So the problem is, if it continues to fall, what's possible to happen as these start leaving? What happens in this direction? If the country's not doing so hot, and they're trying to maintain this par, what could possibly happen as these A's start leaving their vaults? See that we're trying to hold the value the same. In order to hold the value the same, we're having A's, we're having to sell A's, we're buying B's, right? We're buying B's, we're selling A's, we're buying B's. But what's going to eventually happen if the demand continues to plummet? If it's like permanently down here, imagine that the demand curve comes down, whatever, down here. What happens? We run out. We don't have, so when it was going the other direction, we can do that all day long because I control my currency. If I want to supply more, I just run the printing press. Okay, and I can keep doing that, right? So we can indefinitely go that direction, but the other direction, we have a finite supply of foreign currency. Once the currency reserves run out, what is the country forced to do? They've chosen this to be the level. If they run out of foreign currency, what are they forced to do? Cash in the chips, go bankrupt? They can't print more because they don't control it. This is country A has a little central bank over here too, right? These guys print off A's. That's the Bank of A. So once they run out, what are they forced to do? Can they maintain this exchange of let's say this was 1 for 1, just to keep it easy. 1A equals 1B. There's the exchange rate. Can they continue to do that? No. So what do they have to do? They have to change it. They have to abandon the policy. They literally can't do it. And so at that point, they could go on a float and let the market determine it. Or if they choose to want to keep it fixed, they can devalue. So instead of the word depreciation, we use the word devalue. So they would devalue it to whatever they want to devalue it to. Let's just say it ends up being here. We're going to, this is devalue to E3. If they drop it low enough, then we should be back to maybe day in and day out, it roughly offsets each other. Okay, questions on that? All right. So we've got A's wanting to come to the market, and we've got B's that are being exchanged. And when I'm using this, this is kind of the way Khan did it in his stuff, which I kind of like. Kind of supply exceeds demand, and so we need to supply the extra 2 A's to keep it balanced if we keep it at a 1 for 1 rate. If we run out, then that's not going to happen. All right, so let me keep track of a few things here. So under a free market, more B's for A leads to a depreciation of B. This is during the crisis time when they're starting to not perform as well. So with intervention, this is central bank intervention. Central bank sells A on the market to maintain par. Okay, now to the fun part, the speculators. Now we get Wall Street involved, other people. Let's say Wall Street because we're in the United States. What is Wall Street over in United Kingdom again? It's Bell Street or something like that. Do you know, Josh? Hall Street. Something like that. So we get the speculators involved, and they smell blood in the water. They understand what I just showed you guys here, that the bank will eventually run out of A's and be forced to devalue. That sets up a profitable opportunity. How so? I'm going to borrow B's and buy A. We're going to borrow B and buy A. Once the speculators jump in, if they literally go to a bank in this country B, a regular bank, now not the central bank, they say, hey, I'd like to borrow $100,000. Okay, well, you look pretty credible. Here's $100,000 of currency B. Then they go run to the foreign exchange market, and they say, here, I want to trade it for an A. What's the rate? It's always 1 for 1. We're always 1 for 1 at par, right? So now they're holding A's in the hopes that we'll eventually see a depreciation. So they're looking kind of good here. If they're wrong, so if the currency, so this is if the currency stays stable, they just kind of lick their wounds and they get kind of minimal to no loss. Minimal to no loss. So think about it, they're speculating, they went and bought 100,000 B's, traded it for 100,000 A's, and then if it turns out, oh, the bank wrote it out, they got lucky, and the exchange rate stayed the same, they just go back and convert it back to A's. And there might be some transactions costs or whatever. So fairly minimal to no loss. But if we have the run out, if the central bank runs out of A, then they're forced to devalue. So how are we exactly making money? Let's kind of translate this back to some dollars. So we're going to borrow 100 B's and convert to 100 A's on a 1 for A, 1A equals 1B basis is our exchange rate. So if 1A now trades for 2 B's because of the devaluation, we go back to the foreign exchange market, and how many B's do I have in my hand after I do my trade back? 200, because it's 2 for 1. Then I go back to my banker, and I say, oh, here's your 100 back, and I'm holding 100 profit. Okay? So the speculators act like an accelerant to the problem. If the economy was kind of starting to go down anyway on its own, but maybe it would have recovered, maybe it wouldn't have, the currency speculators, if there's enough of them piling on, are accelerating the problem for them. So we now take our 100 A's and we get 200 B's minus the 100 B's. This is the amount borrowed. This is the exchange. And I get 100 profit. So that, in a nutshell, is how currency traders speculate. And they can do this on, any time. They think it doesn't have to be a devalue situation, but this is how countries get into trouble when they fix their exchange rate, is the point of this that's relevant to this chapter. Okay, questions there? Everybody ready to be a currency speculator? So let's look at Thailand. Back in the 90s. Have you heard of George Soros, Josh? No. Huh? George, have you guys heard of George Soros at all? He's one of the wealthiest humans walking around. So he's up there with the Gates. He's not as high as the Gates, but he's in that top 100 group. And he's famous for breaking the Bank of England because the pound was doing this type of thing. And he speculated and kept buying those pounds and holding the other currency. And he had billions to do it with. There was times where it was shaky, but eventually he broke the bank. He literally almost single-handedly broke the Bank of England. And the bank was forced to devalue, and he made more billions. So that's his little speculation story. All right, so Thailand. Thailand example. This was in the 1990s. And the relative interest rate in Thailand was good. So, for example, let's say the United States was at 7%, and Thailand was at 11%. So Thailand was following a fixed exchange rate. So over time, the bahts per dollar was at 0.04 bahts per dollar. So this is AHT is the Thailand currency baht. And so if we look at a map over time, it's just flat. It might wiggle a little bit, but it's basically just flat. And so we had this interest rate environment, and then we had 1997. So the story goes, during the 90s, Thailand was the hot place to be. And so people would start doing some of that borrowing, including the Thailand bankers. So they were able to lend at 11%. So they'd go run off to the United States and say, hey, I can get money at 7%. That's pretty cool. Let me get some of those American dollars, come back to baht, and loan them to my people at 11. Basically creating a profit spread of 4% on your money, just from the exchange rate being fixed. So that's the concept we'll pick up on Friday. We are out of time. Oh.